perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here. Repping America, the center, and common sense. And we're just going to get right into it because we got a lot to cover this week. So let's kick it off. And I found this recently this week, and I think it really sums up why I seem to have sort of a right slant. It's because the left, as much as, I admire a lot of their policies and their way of thinking, I support a lot of their social ways of thinking. I saw this, and it says, if a liberal from 1960 showed up today, they would be a conservative. If a liberal from 2025 showed up in 1960, they'd be considered a dangerous lunatic. And a lot of that is contributing to the problem right now. This dangerous lunatic of a liberal who is just supporting these wild ideas that just really don't make any sense, that are, in some cases anti-Semitic, they're anti-woman, they're, anti-government, they're anti-freedom, anti-America. That's the crazy stuff, and that's why I sound the way I sound. Before we get into the meat of it, I just want to mention that Chef Anne Burrell passed away this week. They don't really know exactly what happened. She was found by her husband in a shower. Supposedly there were pill bottles around. I don't know what that all means because we don't know if they were vitamins or if it was Vicodin. We don't know. But it did get me thinking about that. We're going to get a little more into, addiction. That's something that unfortunately I can talk a lot about. But first, let's go into the world according to Kevin. This is Kevin Kiley. He's a U.S. representative from California. He's like 40 years old. Young guy. I like that, Like I've said in the past, when you have a long time on this earth, you don't want to fuck things up. You look at Joe Biden. He doesn't have a long time left on this earth. And, I think he fucked a lot of shit up. I really think he did. But I really respect this Kevin Kiley guy. He really speaks some honest truths. I don't know everything about him, but, I follow him on Instagram. And he brought forth a couple of interesting things this week. One of them is 1/3 of community college applications are faked for financial aid fraud. You see, that's one of the problems that we face in this country, in this world really, is that anytime you try to offer somebody a leg up or help, it becomes a target for fraud. And the people behind it, behind the money, are not doing any sort of checks. And that's the kind of thing we need to see. I mean, we saw billions of dollars flow out of state coffers during the COVID era, And we need to put an end to this. And another thing we need to put an end to is these so-called nonprofit organizations out there who claim to do one thing, but do another. It's looking more and more like this immigration reform from L.A. Churla is behind the riots, and they get free rent from Los Angeles. They donated $500,000 to Gavin Newsom to fight the recall effort, and in return, they received $34 million. And it's looking more and more like they are behind the protests that led to the riots. They may be the money funnel that was buying supplies and maybe even paying for people to be there. And it reminded me of another group, and I don't remember the name. I covered them before, maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I don't know. But it's an organization up in the Bay Area that receives government money to help the homeless. But what they actually do is spend that money fighting low-income housing in ritzy areas of the Bay. And again, if you're not going to take the money and do what you say you're going to do with it, then why are you receiving money? And while we're on that subject, there ought to be caps on salaries. There ought to be checks and balances in place so that people like one of the guys in LA who's receiving like $500,000 salary, some crazy shit like that, he also hires a security company that he owns and gets money from that. So that he's double dipping. If you're going to be a nonprofit, if you're going to take government money to provide a service, you should at least provide that service. It's the downfall of our society The amount of money we waste on waste. Look at the California bullet train. We voted on one thing, and now the cost is astronomical. It's never going to go where it was supposed to go. And California is hemorrhaging money. Los Angeles is hemorrhaging money. San Francisco is hemorrhaging money. But yet they're giving money to these people who enrich their own lives. They enrich the people around them, and they don't really do anything. Here, especially like Los Angeles, what I see is they spend the money on the homeless, keeping the people homeless. I read about this recently. It's a new zombie drug. It's not new. It's been around for a little while, but it's called Tranq. It's a horse tranquilizer, basically, an animal sedative called xylazine. And it's being put into street fentanyl. And what makes this so dangerous is that it causes rotting abscesses. If you want to see what that looks like, you can look it up for your own. I'm not going to put up that. Pretty gross. It puts users in a semi-conscious trance state. And researchers warn that standard overdose treatments like Narcan are ineffective since it's not an opioid. And they were talking to this guy, Booker. He's a drug addict. They cut the fentanyl with Tranq. It gives these blisters that come out of nowhere, mostly through intravenous drug use when they're injecting it. It causes the skin to blister and abscess. It wears off quickly. It gives you really bad withdrawal symptoms, so you're immediately back to it again. And like he says here, Booker says here, despite the risk, users continue to chase the high. It's a gamble we take. It's something we live with. That's the problem that people don't understand when they're dealing with addiction. You inject something into your arm, and you're going to have to keep injecting it because it's going to produce withdrawals. But along the way, it's going to cause abscesses that can cost you your arm, a leg, your finger. It could kill you. Narcan can't reverse the effects. This is crazy, but yet they're going to take it. And as DEA LA Field Division Special Agent Matthew Allen said, users in Skid Row remain particularly vulnerable. What better market than people who are already mentally ill and drug addicts, preying on people already down? And that's what the drug dealers do. They don't care. Drug dealers are the most psychopathic serial killers known to mankind. They don't give a shit what happens. And the victims, they don't even give a shit what happens to them. And that's why, people like myself, I don't believe that the way to fix homelessness is to just continue to enable it. People say homelessness is not a crime. But if it's not a crime, then you can't get these people in the system. We can't just keep dumping our mentally ill and drug addicted people on the streets and expecting it to work out. And along the way, they want to give out Narcan so that people don't overdose. I mean, what is the plan? We're on episode Q here, and that's one of my questions. What is the plan with the homeless? Are we supposed to let them die out? Because it seems like you're allowing them to do dangerous drugs, but you're also providing the reversal with Narcan. So what are you doing? What the hell? It doesn't make any sense. And what we need a common sense approach to it. And that includes getting people into the system so that at least we could try to clean them up or get them in a mental state where they can try to fix their lives. And I know a lot of them aren't, okay? That's one thing I sadly know. We will be lucky if we could save 30%. But that's better than 0%. That's better than just letting kids escaping abusive, alcoholic families or whatever the issue may be, hitting the streets. And at the age of 19, 20, 18, 17, I mean, you got kids as young as 16 hitting the streets. And it's over. It's game over. And like I always say, we need to do better. And that's the whole foundation of Purple State Party. We need to do better by the people, not the fucking political group. It drives me up the wall because I see what is being proposed as solutions, and I know from my own experience that those aren't solutions. Enough said. So Israel and Iran are still at war. We're 2 weeks into it. Does not look good for Iran. Netanyahu came out that Iran has marked Trump as enemy number one with an assassination plot. And he gave an interview to, I believe it was Bear on Fox News. And he kind of explained why. And I think it bears repeating because it shows the difference in leadership. One of the reasons why I lean towards the right now is because most of the horrible politicians that we see that really make bad policy decisions are people like Gavin Newsom, people like Joe Biden and all the puppet masters behind Joe Biden. But this is what Netanyahu says. They want to kill him. He's enemy number one. He's a decisive leader. He never took the path that others took to try to bargain with them in a way that's weak, giving them basically a pathway to enrich uranium, which means a pathway to the bomb, padding it with billions and billions of dollars. Remember, Biden released a lot of money. He tore up that fake agreement and basically tore it up. He took up this fake agreement and basically tore it up. He killed Soleimani, and he's made it very clear, including now, you cannot have a nuclear weapon, which means you cannot enrich uranium. He's been very forceful. For Iran, he's enemy number one. You know, a lot of people say that the reason why Iran is enriching uranium is because Trump tore up that whatever nuclear deal that Obama had, where they're releasing money to stop them from enriching uranium. Unfortunately, we know they're enriching uranium. And even worse, they're not allowing inspectors in to see what levels it is and what's being done with it. It was a fake agreement. You can't bargain with criminals. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't. And so many armed robberies end in murder, even though the victims have given up the watch, the wallet, the cell phone, the ATM codes. Because criminals, much like drug dealers, are a blight on society. They are psychotic killers. That's what they are. They're committed to themselves, and they don't give a shit about other people. And that's what Iran is. Iran is the agitator in that entire region. They are the ones who are supplying weapons and money and food and support to the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah. This is not conjecture. This is just known fact. So, sadly, that's what has to happen. War has to happen. Somebody has to take out Iran, and it's going to be Israel. And quite frankly, Israel is, I would say, the number one or number two fighting force. I don't care about numbers. What I care about is spirit. What I care about is dedication. That's what makes America strong. That's what makes Israel strong. The men and women of the armed forces who are willing to lay down their lives for their country. You don't get that in places like Iran. Yeah, these people are militant. They think they're doing it in the name of God, Allah, and all that. But the truth of the matter is, when the bullets start flying, they're fucking cowardly. Okay? The leaders of Hamas live in Abu Dhabi as billionaires. They're not on the ground fighting. It's the Israelis, though, that will put the forces on the ground or the planes in the sky and do what needs to be done. But let's get to some more Q stuff. Queens. The reason I chose queens here is, much like kings, they were not elected. They don't answer to the peasants. And that's what we live with, especially here in California. I'm reminded of the tea tax, the Stamp Act, those taxes that the English put on the American colonies. And in return, what did the American colonies get? Not much. Not much at all. That's why we broke away, because we realized that we were paying England money, but at the end of the day, we had to take care of ourselves. That's California, isn't it? We pay all of this frickin' money for the gorgeous weather and all that, but what do we get in return? Do we get any common sense laws? No. We get the opposite. We get a government that seems to be working with the bad guy. We get a government that supports illegal aliens over ICE, who supports criminals over victims, who supports drug addicts and drug dealers over common citizens who are just trying to go to work. That's why it was so laughable when the left tried this whole no kings thing. They're the ones. They're the ones. Look back during the COVID pandemic. Look at who had the most draconian laws, who locked down their states, who forced us into masks, who lied, who cheated, who allowed fraud to be rampant, who silenced people on social media when people tried to bring up questions. It was the Democrats. They're the kings and queens. I've said it before and I'll say it again. They're the kings and queens of the modern era. They're not answerable to us. Do you think Gavin Newsom gives a rat's fuck how I feel or my wife feels or my daughter feels? You think he cares? He doesn't give one shit. He only cares about Gavin Newsom and Gavin Newsom's circle. That's it. The rest of it, it's just going to be laughable policies. We're still going ahead with the bullet train. We still think our solution to homelessness works. We still think that we're this like beacon of change that should lead the nation. We can't even get our shit right. Most of our cities are broke. And it's explainable why they're broke. We can look at why they're broke. But they keep going. Why? Because they don't answer to us. So anyhow, next cue would be questions. I've got a few questions here. Why do these extremely liberal people start screaming or just run away when the questions get hard? You know why? Because they know their point of view is wrong, but they can't handle change. So they cover themselves in the blanket. They hide and they hope that the boogeyman goes away. That's not American. That's not the America that I grew up knowing. The America that I grew up knowing would fight back, would fight for tooth and nail. But they don't have a leg to stand on because they know what they're doing is wrong. We're seeing it here in LA. Come on. Rounding up illegal immigrants. Well, they're here illegally. I mean, it's an open and shut case as far as I'm concerned. Like I always say, it's purple and gray around here, but some things are black and white. If you're here illegally, you're here illegally. If you employ illegals, that's illegal. They're going after both of the sources, and instead of allowing them to do the job, the left, being funded by things like people like George Soros or organizations like Chirla, are fighting the cops. And why are they fighting the cops? Because their point of view is right? No. They're just doing it to keep the troops in the field. They want these people agitated. The Democratic Party has suffered some big losses lately. A lot of their ideals have been exposed as simply wrong. And they know that the only way that they're ever going to win again is if they rile up this young base into believing that these people are fighting for something. They're not fighting for anything. Protesting against ICE, you're not fighting for anything. You want immigration reform? Fine, let's work for it. Right? You want to give people a pathway to citizenship? Fine. Let's just get you on paper. I have no problem with that. Remember, I'm purple. I'm not red or blue. I don't subscribe to, this willy-nilly immunity that Obama did, but I certainly do not think that we should abolish pathways to citizenship. Here's another one. Why is rounding up illegal aliens considered fascist when it's not? Why is it that one of our state senators or whatever, a rising star in the Democratic Party, Scott Wiener, real name, is proposing to make it illegal for law enforcement to wear masks, specifically ICE, when he himself was posting videos wearing a mask saying masks save lives? You don't think that might apply to law enforcement? That maybe keeping their identity secret keeps them safe? When you talk about illegal immigration, I pose a simple question. If you sneak into a movie, do they let you finish the movie? No. It's the same thing with illegal immigration. If you're here illegally and we catch you, you need to be deported. Now, if you want to offer people who have varying circumstances an opportunity to apply for citizenship, go for it. We do the same thing right now if you self-deport. We'll give you a plane ticket. We'll give you $1,000, which is a shit ton of money in other countries. And we will also expedite your paperwork if you want to come back legally. Nobody's trying to be an asshole. If we need people here to do jobs that Americans won't do, which I think is a crock of shit, but if you believe that, fine. All right, so to my next question. What can we do about the government, the problems that we have with our government right now? I don't want to be accused of just being a complainer. I'm trying to come up with solutions. I honestly believe that if I had the set of tools to run for mayor or governor, that's what I would do. I don't know if I'm cut out for that. Like the video says, duck broken. I am. I have a lot of issues. I know this. But here is something that we can do about government. Vote for moderates. No matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you're red or blue, vote for the moderates. Vote for the people who support things that make sense. If we can do that, we can start to move forward again. Like I said at the beginning of the show, about the liberal going back to the 1960s, or if they came forward, how they'd be a conservative. We could keep democratic social ideas, right? Gay rights, things like that. But we also have to mix in some common sense. That's what purple state is. Another question that I had was, should we intercede in Iran? Should the U.S. actually get involved? Quite frankly, yes. The reason why is because they have destabilized the entire region. And by destabilizing the entire region, it makes it impossible for countries to ever get stabilized. I know that's kind of redundant what I just said there, but you look at places like Iraq and Afghanistan. They had their so-called dictatorial evil regimes removed, and they've now replaced them with a new evil regime. But that was because of financing from Iran. Iran funded these people and gave them the weapons. They say that, might makes right. And I don't know if that's entirely true. I think sometimes might just makes it easier for you to subjugate people. And a lot of that money is flowing from Iran. And I think we have a duty to keep that region stabilized. That's where we get our oil. We can't have the Houthis trying to sink ships. We can't have Hamas attacking Israel again. We can't have Hezbollah holding Lebanon hostage. Keep in mind that, back 60s and 70s, places like Lebanon and Iran were very nice places. They were very moderate. Israel has a Jewish population and an Arab population. Israel proves that these people can coexist, that even though you have fundamental religious differences, or maybe you have different heritages, it doesn't mean that you have to be at war constantly. The last question I have is, when people are out there bad-mouthing Trump, the question I want to ask is, what was passed using the auto pen? It became abundantly clear that Biden was not in control. Biden was not making decisions. Biden would say one thing and do another. And I look at something like how Fauci got a preemptive pardon, and I wonder if that was just completely falsified. If some staffer didn't simply just type up the order, put it on the auto pen, boom, Fauci has himself a pardon. But what was passed? What executive orders were actually issued by Joe Biden, which were done by his staff, the people around him? How much did Jill Biden pass? We don't know this. But that is scary, that you could have like a young radical staffer simply passing or giving out pardons. That's dangerous, and I think it needs to be unraveled. And I don't think it needs to be unraveled simply because we want to make Joe Biden look bad. That's mission accomplished. That he already did that to himself. But we need to figure out if any of this stuff was just completely falsified. Hey, look, if Joe Biden was behind 100% of it, fine, leave it. But if he had nothing to do with it, if it was just some rogue agent in the White House, well, we need to rescind that. All right, so we're going to end with Quindecim. What is Quindecim? Quindecim was a location in a Japanese anime called Death Parade. I highly recommend it. It was a limited run series. I think it was a total of 12 episodes. It kind of had a Twilight Zone vibe. It was very, very interesting. But at the time that we watched Death Parade, I started a Minecraft world. 8, 9, it could even be 10 years ago, And I just wanted to share this because this is one of the joys I find in life. And I always tell people, before you get old, develop some hobbies. Give yourself something to do when you retire so that you have a reason to get up every morning. And for me, the way I get through a lot of days is just reminding myself, hey, when I'm done with this tough day, sometimes I'm walking around warehouses 9-10 miles in one day, exhausted, sweaty, but I know I have my Minecraft to look forward to, and it helps me out. But recently I had some really interesting comments that came through from my daughter's friends. I got called a base Minecraft player because I won't kill the Ender Dragon and finish the game. I just want to live in my little forever world, right? And to me, that was a great honor. I'm 56, and if somebody 18 says that I'm base, wow, that makes me feel good about myself. But another one of her friends thought it was kind of stupid, the way that I'm just doing this forever world. I'm not finishing it. But other people on the chat jumped in and said that it was the purest form of gameplay, doing my own thing, and then I was Minecraft maxing. And it was just such a compliment. And, the reason I bring it up is because there's a lot of stuff about the modern world that is easily rejected by old people or older people. And I think they're missing the point. I think there's a lot of fun right now. There's a lot of opportunities. There is a lot of ways that you can create this hobby for yourself by watching things like YouTube videos and watching people do things. You could watch people doing Sudoku. You could watch people who do puzzles, who play video games, who knit, who weave, who build stuff out of scrap metal. It is so important. If you take nothing away from Mr. Kid Copious here, it's that you have to develop hobbies and give yourself a reason to get up every morning and to fight through every day and to continue that grind mindset. Because I'm telling you, I see it around me all the time. The people who have nothing but just going out and, going to bars, stuff like that. Man, when old age hits them, it hits them hard. It really does. If you have something to come home to, something to occupy your time, something to live for. That's the most important thing. Something to live for. If you don't have someone to live for, you need to have something to live for. I'm kind of making myself a little bit sad now because I'm thinking about all the people that I know that have fallen along the way. My road to where I am today is littered with the corpses of the people who didn't make it. Well, if that's not depressing, I don't know what is. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party. And so are you. Love one another. Keep up the grind. And whenever possible, dance it out. Because music is life. Hit it, Steve.